spider wearing the red of the Sword of Light rocketed over a rise and skidded to a halt just in front of Jason's mech. Who are you? Captain Youngblood of the Crescent Hawks. The spider executed a slight bow. Gunshow Takata of the Ivory Dragon. The Nova Cats are surrounded. They are trying to break through to the city. They are coming. They are coming now. How many? All of them. Takata's odd whisper silenced all of the calm chatter. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary to construct a light battle mech which can operate as an efficient scout and special forces unit, and to assume the powers of laser and fire, the Spider answers the call. In 2650, that call came from the Star League Defense Force. They needed a battle mech that could serve as a general-purpose special forces unit that could operate for long periods of time away from logistics lines, and that was swift and agile enough to avoid enemy fire. Normally, such a request would result in a flurry of interest from various battle mech manufacturers who would then require some time to design and write up a proposal. This time, one of those proposals arrived immediately from an unlikely source. Newhart Interstellar Industries Limited, a well-established producer of aerospace fighters, was ready not just with a mech design, but one which they were prepared to begin producing immediately. Impressed by the immediate response and knowing that waiting for other proposals would mean unneeded delay, the SLDF bigwig decided to give Newhart the contract. The company knew a lot was on the line as this was their first venture into the battle mech market. Their design, designated the SDR-5V Spider, had to be a hit. The 30-ton light mech was conceived as a swift and very agile mech that defied convention for existing battle mech designs. Its sleek form and finned-back structures made the mech look more like an aerospace fighter than a battle mech in many respects. With a top speed of 130 km per hour thanks to its Pitman 240 Fusion engine and a total jump distance of 240 meters, one might be forgiven for thinking the mech could actually fly if it caught the right headwinds. The 8-12-8 movement profile was crucial for the Spider's success as it paid for that speed with only 3.5 tons of Duralex light plate armor. With just 56 points of protection, anything more powerful than a medium laser strike was sure to go internal and risk crucial systems. A Spider's survival would depend upon its speed and agility. To quote the legendary Lightning McQueen, "I am speed." In addition to its sleek and narrow design, speed, and the ability to leap great distances on jump jets, the Spider also benefited from a strong sensor and communications package which further improved the mech's capabilities as a forward scout unit. The downside to this non-standard computer, along with the very streamlined cockpit, was substantial. To some, it was a deal-breaker that rendered the mech unusable. The inability to eject placed the Spider's Mechwarrior into the perilous position of always either returning with the functional battle mech or, more disturbingly, likely dying within it. While one might assume that this would make the mech extremely unpopular among mechwarriors, the opposite was actually true. Much like the pilots of the 20th and 21st centuries, there's something about the job of Mechwarrior which draws the adventurous risk-takers. As it turned out, many were willing to take their chances with the Spider in hope of achieving glory. Some, like Mechwarrior Rhonda Stilson of the Draconis March Militia, even painted their Spiders in garish and bright colors so they would stand out and challenge enemies to take their shot. Stilson earned a reputation for not just skilled piloting, but also had an unmerciful streak toward her opponents. The Spider was back, cautiously creeping along the mule's edge. The startled Fusilier pilot managed to get off a wild shot from his twin lasers before Castor's assault mech was on top of him. Castor's eyes flickered down, caught a flash of silver where his earlier attack had burned the paint from the Spider's leg and melted the armor underneath. Acting on instinct, Castor balled his Banshee's right hand into a fist and smashed it into the damaged limb. The Spider's leg snapped off and the unbalanced mech toppled to the deck. Castor didn't even break stride. He was already moving around the crippled mule. A quick glance at his rear monitor showed him that Malfont's quickdraw had paused to finish off the Spider. Constructed around that previously mentioned 240 Pitman Fusion engine and Newhart's own specially designed 1200 structure, everything about the Spider screams speed, Yet it's not entirely defenseless. The twin Aberdavi Mark III medium lasers installed into the center torso offered consistent ammo-free fire. While not doing a huge amount of damage, the tried and true medium laser was the workhorse of intersphere conflict for hundreds of years and shouldn't be underestimated. When going up against other light mechs, a medium laser strike could still be deadly. Old fans of Mechwarrior Online will be quick to share stories of the Spider and its netcode-enhanced superpowers. Hitting the little bugger with anything but a prolific amount of fire oftentimes felt impossible. Likely, the MWO Spider led to more than its share of rage quit moments. Maybe it should get a sponsorship for keyboards for so many being slammed in frustration over the years. Production of the Spider 5V was started, and by 2650 the first off the line were shipped to SLDF units. As predicted, the Spider's speed was its greatest asset. Able to match or exceed the speed of most other battle mechs at the time, the Spider was an incredible scouting asset. Reports were very favorable, and production continued at the New Heart line on New Earth. Unfortunately, just over a century later, that production line was destroyed by the forces of Stefan Amaris on the Usurper's destructive tour around the near-Terran systems. Without new Spiders and a dearth of spare parts, the future of the battlemech looked bleak. The succession wars were hard on the Spiders that weren't ferried away with Kerensky's Exodus fleet. Without the specially designed spare parts, the Spiders eventually found their way either into long-term storage or scrap heaps if the damage was too severe. In the case of the Spider, it wasn't a loss of technological know-how which reduced their numbers as much as the effort required to create the new production line. The Succession Wars reports of Spider antics are plentiful. In 2970, a couple of mech warriors serving House Steiner were sent on a behind-the-lines raid into Combine-held territory on the world Leblon. Locating a supply dump, the two Spiders raced into it, firing their medium lasers into every possible target on their rush through the site. A predicted attempt to rally and defend against the twin light mechs was interrupted by a simultaneous assault by the rest of the Steiner 12th Star Guards. A significant amount of supplies that were not destroyed ended up in the hands of Steiner forces. Eventually, someone within the Free Worlds League obtained detailed plans of the Spider, and once shared in an exclusive contract with the Nimikachi Fusion Products Company, a new production line for the mech was set up. Finally, after so many years, Spider was back on the menu. Later, a second line was set up within the Draconis Combine to meet market demand. Variants of the Spider were few and far between outside of the occasional field refit due to the rarity and the low production numbers. A lightning strike froze running infantry for a heartbeat. Then, the Kellhound soldiers continued into the spaceport. Muzzle flashes lit the darkened facility and spread out like fireflies moving on an evening breeze. Farther left, a cascade of explosions took the legs off of a Locust. Nearby, a Spider had done its best to support the Locust, but it lit off its jump jets to escape before the Locust hit the ground. The Spider 5K was a Draconis Combine refit first spotted in 2850, which left the mech largely untouched except for the removal of one of the medium lasers and the downright sacrilegious removal of two jump jets, dropping the movement profile to 8-12-6. The 2 tons of mass were then spent on a pair of machine guns split between the left and right arms and a single ton of ammunition placed into the mech's center torso, where it would never end up being a liability. Word has it that the 5K was unpopular among even the most thrill-seeking of mech warriors. It ended up being relegated to militia duty. Stepping down the line 3 years, the Federated Sons took their stab at their own refit, which retained the 8-12-8 movement, but still sacrificed one of the medium lasers in favor of a flamer in the right arm. The end result was a slightly more niche use for the Spider, trading a little bit of the offensive punch for the delight that comes from turning infantry into involuntary nightlights. I kinda dig it. In 3051, the Spider received its Helm Memory Core upgrade in the variant designated the 7M. Nimikachi Fusion Products made it available for wide purchase, so it wasn't just limited to Free Worlds League-aligned units. The 7M was a substantial rework that took advantage of a new endosteel frame and 3 tons of Callan Free Worlds League special ferrofibrous armor plate. It maintained the movement speed of 8-12-8 and, unfortunately, also the 10 single heat sinks. Both of the standard medium lasers were swapped out for a pair of Tronel 12 medium pulse lasers, which sacrificed a bit of range for accuracy and improved damage. It might not seem like much, but going up to a more accurate 6 damage from 5 was enough to make mech warriors of other light mechs nervous. Pulse lasers were a big deal when they returned to the scene in the inner sphere, and the Spider 7M could use them to great effect. While not terrible, the single heatsinks were a bit of a disappointment, even though the 7M could fire both lasers while on the run and still remain heat neutral. The problem arises in the use of the jump jets, which the Spider often relies upon to stay alive. Still, a little heat management goes a long way with the light mech like this. While many Helm memory core upgrade variants can be hit or miss, the 7M is a solid and reasonable effort. Running slightly behind the first two, a Spider and what looked like a factory-new Jenner had triggered their jump jets and sailed over the dangerous terrain. They landed less than 50 meters behind Ty's Charger and ripped into his rear armor with a flurry of green and blue medium laser bolts. Ty had wasted precious seconds destroying the Jenner, judging it to be the more dangerous of the two. The Spider had escaped on its jump jets, heading deeper into the battlefield, where Ty hoped it would meet its end. Of course, the Draconis Combine couldn't leave good enough alone, and in 3054 they decided to create a variant that included a C3 slave unit in their right torso. This came at the cost of a downgrade of one of the 7M's medium pulse lasers to the standard variety. The Spider C is an interesting little evolutionary sidestep. For those running a C3 unit, it isn't a half bad option as a scout or spotter. Taking a hop, skip, and jump down the timeline to 3060, the Spider 8M answers the prayers of warm mech warriors everywhere by taking the 7M and finally upgrading to double heatsinks. The Ferrofibrous is there along with Endosteel and the 8-12-8 movement. The only difference was that now you could leap the full 8 hexes, fire both medium pulse lasers, and still not generate excess heat. You may not like this, but this is what peak Spider performance looks like. The 8M is a great mech for new players who should experience the fun of light mechs without the fuss and muss of heat management. Just don't forget ABM, always be moving. The Spiders descended from either side, landing next to the bigger catapult like two wasps descending on a grasshopper. Inside its weapon range, the catapult showed its one weakness against the Spider's strengths. It had no arms and was virtually helpless against their melee attacks. Connor throttled back, and they watched as the Spiders took the big mech apart piece by piece. In 3067, the Draconis Combine took another crack at updating the Spider with their 7K entry into the pantheon of variants. Its big leap forward was the introduction of a light engine into the frame, which brought enough mass to boost the overall protection of the mech with 5.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor. Leaping up to 98 armor points significantly boosts the durability of the design. 13 armor points on each leg instead of 5 is very nice. The 7K's 2 medium pulse lasers in the center torso are basically standard by this point in the timeline, and it's difficult to see a more effective weapon set for such a highly mobile battle mech. How's that for rage comment bait? Not being able to leave good enough alone, the Cretans did fiddle with the 7K, and in 3068 they introduced the 7K2 Spider, which pulled both those medium lasers we were just slobbering over in favor of an ER large laser. The light engine is there along with Endosteel and ferrofibrous armor. However, in order to cram in that laser, a half ton of the armor had to be shaved off along with one of the jump jets, dropping the Spider's movement profile to 8-12-7. Heresy, I know. But if you like the idea of a very mobile ER large laser platform that can fire every turn without overheating, it's nice to have the Spider 7K2 as an option. Just 2 years later, in 3070, the Cretans did it again with the Spider 7KC. It looked much like the previous entries in the 7K series, though this Spider was intended much more as a support light scout with just a single light PPC in its center torso and a C3 slave computer installed into the head critical location. At least it has that 8-12-8 movement profile and that 5.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, so it's got that going for it. As we often have to say with the C3 variants of mechs, they can be useful, though I cannot remember the last time I saw someone attempt to run a C3 force on the table. The last of the 7 series of spiders arrived in 3074, and it's also our first Operation Sneaky Sneak variant thanks to its inclusion of an Angel ECM suite in the right torso. It cost the mech one of those valuable medium pulse lasers from the original Spider 7K, but sometimes sacrifices have to be made to reach a higher plane of existence as a stealth spider. With its 5.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor and that old reliable 812-8 movement profile, this is one tough spider to pin down once the ECM is flipped on. Across the inner sphere, the aging Succession Wars and Clan Invasion spiders were showing their age. With the word of Blake running roughshod over anything and everything, every option was on the table for finding the warriors and equipment necessary to fight back. One of those projects included a significant rework of the spider. The resulting design series, designated the Spider 8X, was first produced in 3078, and it pushed the opportunity cost table with several firsts for our noble spider. The use of endosteel was no surprise, but the installation of a 240 extra light fusion engine required the use of 6 tons of standard armor instead of ferrofibrous. The new configuration also contributed to a significantly different look for the normally sleek spider. The traditional 8 jump jets were included on the mech, but they were aided by the addition of the new partial wing technology, which pushed the mech's movement profile to 8-12-10 and provided the mech with additional cooling in a standard atmosphere. The 10 double heat sinks were more than adequate for dissipating the heat generated by movement, and the warm and comfy twin medium pulse lasers were once again placed into the center torso. Many of the Spider 8Xs ended up in the hands of the Combined Sword of Light units, but some were also spotted among the forces of the future Rosselhog Dominion. He spotted the spider about the same time it spotted him. At 30 tons, the slightly smaller mech was armed with a pair of medium lasers and its speed. The spider's Mechwarrior didn't hesitate, opening up with a well-placed shot that slammed into Harley's center torso like a javelin. One of the lasers missed, but the other quaked Harley's cockpit forward and backward as the damage display showed a staggering loss of armor. When Krupp Armament Works on Terra was tasked with creating a new mech design that could act as a fast recon unit, immediately they began to look at the Spider 8X for inspiration. It had performed well against the word of Blake, and there was every indication that the spider could serve the Republic of the Sphere well. Their Spider 8R eschewed the partial wing in favor of 8 improved jump jets, which gobbled up internal locations, but did push the movement profile to 7-11-10. Unfortunately, this did require dropping the light fusion engine size down to 210, and there was just enough mass left for 3.5 tons of standard plate. This is a much more fragile spider that's also lost a bit of its punch with the swap from pulse lasers to 2 ER medium lasers in the center torso. It's a little rough, but the Spider 8R does quite a bit right. The decision to go with the 8X or the 8R could be a difficult one, but personally I think I'd lean toward the 8X for the partial wing and to retain the armor boost. The improved jump jets require a little too much to make this work on the platform. The last of the 8 series spiders was the 8K, produced in 3084. It was basically the 7K version of the BattleMech, but with an XL engine and 4 tons of ferrofibrous armor. The 2 medium pulse lasers were sacrificed upon the altar of Big PPC, with the addition of a snub-nosed PPC along with the PPC capacitor in the center torso instead. This was made possible through the inclusion of a compact gyro as well. It's been a while since we bombarded the snub-nosed PPC with praise, so for the uninitiated, we're looking at 10 damage out to 15 hexes for 10 heat. But the gem of the weapon is the fact that the range bracketing is very good for such a gun. Its short range is 9 hexes, medium range at 13, and only long range for the last 2 hexes out to 15. If it helps, think of this as the PPC version of the pulse laser accuracy. The addition of the capacitor makes the snub-nosed PPC hit as hard as a Gauss rifle, so enemies beware. I dig the 8K as a decent alternative to the 7 series, though it's up to you if you feel the XL engine is worth the risk. Oh, and before we move on, the 8 series of spiders also received the much appreciated functioning ejection system for the Mechwarrior. Talk about a quality of life improvement. By 3090, Nimikachi Fusion Products Limited started to market their next iterative upgrade to the spider designated the 9M. The company claimed that it offered greatly increased short-range firepower, but like with many corporate press releases, such statements prompted skepticism. The 9M featured all of the weight-saving bits once expected from the late 31st century, including endosteel, an XL engine, and 4.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. The classic 8-12-8 movement profile was there, and 10 double heatsinks provided plenty of cooling. The primary selling point for the 9M was the installation of 2 variable speed medium pulse lasers, which promised increased damage on a target as the mech closed in. At long range, each laser did just 5 damage, but at short range, just 2 hexes and closer, it almost doubles its damage to 9. The most notable drawback for these 2 VSP medium lasers was that they weighed twice as much as a medium pulse laser, so that's 4 tons apiece. The 9M put a lot on the line for this new technology. Additionally, customers were disheartened to learn that Nimikachi had not adopted the ejection seat technology from the 8 series Spiders, so once again, piloting a Spider was a dangerous prospect. Now I know the 9M has its fans out there, but I'm a bit torn on the MVSPs. While it isn't a variant I think I would take out into the field unless I had no choice, it's not actually a bad build. Moving on to our comedy entry into the pantheon of Spiders, the 8 series made a return with the Spider 8XR, which not only had an XL engine, endosteel, and partial wing with jump jets that pushed the movement profile to 8-12-10, but it also maximized the silliness with the inclusion of a sword in the right arm. That's right, a sword. While you're recovering from that somewhat modest 4 damage per hit, the 8XR could follow up with its 5 Eeyore small lasers scattered over the torsos and head. This is an odd duck build that really highlights the lack of damage that light and even medium mechs can do with physical weaponry. I suppose if you're a fan of swords on mechs, the 8XR could be a viable option, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Our last official variant arrived on the scene in 3131, and it's the closest we have to an IlClan era update on the Noble Spider. It has the various mass-saving features we're used to by this point. The XL engine is there along with endosteel and the 10 double heatsinks. However, the Spider 10K is protected by 4.5 tons of ballistic reinforced armor. While not directly stated in the lore, it's likely the Cretans expected to use the Spider 10K against the Davions who, as we all know, love their ballistics weapons more than they love hanging on to their capital world. It's an interesting idea for adding a little bit of durability to the Spider, which is often lacking adequate defense, and relying upon almost entirely just the speed and agility to avoid shuffling that mortal coil. The 10K's only weapon was a large re-engineered laser located in the right torso, which could do 9 damage out to 15 hexes. It does benefit from slightly improved accuracy, and due to its unique properties does its full energy damage to targets that are protected by ferrolamellar, reflective, and hardened armor. These armor types are more frequently being seen on units that dare challenge the Noble Dragon, so it's likely the 10K will get some exhaustive use moving deeper into the IlClan era. Now before we ride off into the sunset on our proud and fleet-of-foot Spider, I did want to take a crack at the totally unofficial and non-canon variant of the mech. The now traditional endosteel and 8-12-8 movement profile are there thanks to an XL engine, though I did tweak things a bit with 5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. Additionally, I shaved off 1.5 tons of mass with the addition of an extra light gyro. All of this was done in service to the idea that we want to get a snub-nosed PPC as close to the enemy as possible, as quickly as possible. Safety is no concern. The 1MF didn't waste any time with an ejection system. Mech warriors who eject are just quitters. For extremely close-range conflict resolution, 2 small pulse lasers in the right arm were aided by an actuator enhancement system, which adds additional accuracy to an already accurate weapon. Sure, they're just a couple of small pulse lasers, but you want them to hit when something is that close. While not a huge damage producer, I think the Spider MF would be quite fun to take into battle. And if you're not having fun in your interstellar mech combat, then why even bother? The Spider runs as a much maligned mech thanks to Mechwarrior Online, but I don't think it has anything to do with the mech itself. Its sleek design is explained by its aerospace company influence, and that is great fluff. It has some really solid configurations as we move down the timeline. The Spider appeals to our thrill-seeking genes by pushing the opportunity cost closer to speed and agility, and in this case, it really works. There are seemingly many mech warriors willing to take on the additional risk in order to go really fast and leap across the sky on plumes of pillowy fire. Do you have a favorite spider variant that has earned you fame and glory? Would you take the 1MF into battle? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked BattleTech. If you enjoyed the video and felt it was worthy, don't forget that thumbs up button, and even hitting the subscribe button will make sure you see more of my nonsense in the future. For those of you who have already taken that extra step of becoming channel members or supported on Ko-fi, thank you very much. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.